Most leadership advice focuses on what to do, but what about how you're wired to do it? Welcome to the Empowered Half Hour. I'm Becca Powers, a nervous system leadership expert and best-selling author. Here we talk about life and leadership, pressure and performance through the lens of the, more specifically your, nervous system, because how regulated you are shapes how well you lead. Each conversation is designed to find your blueprint to help you lead with more steadiness, clarity, and impact without burning yourself or your people out. It's my intention to help you come back home to yourself and to savor moments that you might be rushing through. And that starts right now. If you're able to, close your eyes, put your left hand on your heart and your right hand on your gut. Now take a deep breath in through your nose for a count of 4. Hold for 2. Now exhale powerfully through your mouth for a count of 6. There you are. Now put a smile on that face. It's officially tea time. Welcome to another episode of the Empowered Half Hour. And I have with me one of my new buddies that I have met through one of my former coaches, Allison Walsh, who you guys may know. I have with me today Colette Fehr, and she is a psychotherapist, TEDx speaker, and author of The Cost of Quiet. And she's just a gem of a human being. And I think you guys are going to love today's conversation. So Colette, welcome to the show.
Thank you. What a great intro. I'm already beaming.
Yeah, me too. I'm like, our pre-conversation was so good. So you guys are in for it today.
I agree. We are warmed up and ready to roll.
That's right. So I want to start with your book, The Cost of Quiet. I mean, obviously you have an extensive background as a psychotherapist, and you've been coaching clients, seeing them under your profession, seeing them as a coach too. And I imagine that there's a reason this book came to life.
There is. So this book is the culmination of both my life and professional experiences. And it really starts with my first marriage because,
personal story coming into it, because I'm probably relating. So continue.
Yeah, I mean, just like the lived experience. I mean, even going back farther than that, when I was a kid, I had this like wonderful situation with my parents where I'm an only child and we're all together all the time and everything's perfect. And then my parents hit a rough patch and they started to argue a lot and everything in the household changed. And I can remember being in bed at night as a kid, listening to them fight and crying and having a stomach ache and just praying for it to stop. And thinking to myself, when I grow up, I'm going to have the perfect marriage. We'll never argue. And I would dream about that. That fantasy was what really got me through. And somehow I believed as a kid that the universe, that God, the powers that be, that somehow there was a rightness and a justification that I would be delivered this perfect marriage. And so fast forward to college, I meet the man who would become my first husband when I'm 18 years old. He was handsome and charismatic and swept me off my feet, made me feel safe and protected, seemed to be exactly what I had dreamed up as a child. And I remember thinking, I'm going to have this beautiful, perfect, conflict-free marriage with this man. And I didn't realize that not having any conflict wasn't really the flex that I thought it was.
Right.
So by the time we got married, we'd never had a single argument. And from the outside looking in, we had everything. And people thought we were a golden couple. We just both had great jobs and we had the matching SUVs and Labrador retrievers and the literal white picket fence. But real true emotional connection was missing. And unfortunately, we hit a bunch of, as I got older and got to know myself and realized that I really did have emotional needs and that I had been suppressing them, because when I'd try to bring them forward, however indirectly, I usually didn't get a very good response from him. So I started doing what I call good girl-itis, where you people please and put your needs last. And I started even trying to talk myself out of my needs and just be happy with what I had. There was this dissonance of like, I have this perfect thing. Why am I not happy? And I didn't know anything that I now know about attachment science, that wanting and needing true substantive connection is part of the human experience. So, anyway, long story short, we ended up going to a terrible marriage counselor who made things worse instead of better. She wasn't properly trained to work with couples. We got divorced when my girls were little. But that experience, like so much of our suffering, prompted me to go back to grad school to become a couples therapist, to really help people, to get properly trained, to be able to help people. And then I began to see so many women in my office, really smart, emotionally intelligent women who were not getting a great response from their partner, and they ended up suppressing their natural, normal needs for connection. They ended up, and I realized that what I had learned through years of being a therapist and the way I show up in my marriage now was a process that I could bring to these women to help them, whether they stay or leave. And that's why I wrote The Cost of Quiet.
I love it, and there's so many things in your story that I wanna talk about. I wanna come back to the framework, but first, I just wanna talk about the actual cost of being quiet, because as
Yeah.
you're sharing your story, I can see within myself how that's impacted my romantic relationships, even, like, relationships with my children, down to my career. I mean, I think, at one point in my actually, at 2 points in my career, the cost of staying quiet cost me major health issues, and so I just want to talk about the cost, because I think that's so there's a lot of women that tune into this, and I think that, and there are a lot of powerful women, but we still suppress ourselves to fit the mold. And so, like, let's talk about the cost.
Yes. Okay. I'm glad you asked this because, first of all, the title, and I loved the title from the moment I
Me
conceived of
too.
the book. This title came to me because I think it's really lyrical. But quiet is really a euphemism for avoiding hard conversations. I am not remotely quiet. Okay. I'm a New York Italian girl. I never shut up. I will chat forever. So, most of these women are not going to identify with the idea of being quiet.
100%.
But when there is a really important relationship and there's a lot at stake, we tend to foreclose on our own needs. And there's usually an automatic, I call it the siren song of avoidance. There's this narrative in the mind that says, you know what? This isn't going to go anywhere anyway. So why bother? If I say this, I'm just making waves. I'll be seen as difficult. You know what? This is only going to start an argument. All of that stuff tends to come up in such an automated way in these key moments. We don't really want to put ourselves out there because often we tell ourselves it'll hurt worse if I say it and my needs aren't met than it will just to keep it to myself. So it is about suppressing ourselves in these key moments when it doesn't feel like it will go anywhere. The problem is when we do that, it feels like expediency. It feels like protecting the job, the relationship, ourselves. But what it really does is destroy our inner well being. And you are onto something. There's a lot of research that shows that emotional suppression about painful feelings and needs that are natural and normal to have actually makes us sick. It causes irritable bowel syndrome,
The gut
cancer.
health. Yes.
Yes, it causes autoimmune diseases. And
I
these
had
things, there's,
autoimmune because of it. Yes, that
yes.
suppression.
Yes, there is research to support this. And for women, the number one cause of death is cardiovascular disease. Emotional suppression has also been linked to this. Not to mention that from a mental health standpoint, it causes anxiety and depression. We disconnect from ourselves. It becomes a self abandonment. And we may be perfectly outspoken in all these other areas, but when it really counts, when a part of us is needing and wanting and yearning, if we're not saying what's true, we are going to harm ourselves more than any conversation that doesn't go well
Oh
will.
my gosh, Colette, you just rocked my whole entire world by saying disconnected. And I have been feeling this for years, that just through my own personal experience too, in key critical moments, I have stayed quiet, and which is odd because on the outside looking in, I talk a lot. I'm on podcasts. I speak on stages, right? People are like, oh, Becca speaks her mind. Yeah, but to your point, maybe not in the most critical moments,
Right.
right?
Not when it feels unsafe as conflict of these relationships can. Exactly. I'm just like you.
Yeah, and then, like, so for me, it manifested exactly what you talked about. Like, at first, it started off as gut health issues, but as like in the few times that I have stayed committed to this cost of quiet, syndrome, I I have ended up with gut health issues, and in the worst case, I ended up with autoimmune disease. I'm now testing negative, like, my ANA is negative, but it took me 4 years to heal.
Yep.
4. I'm like,
Yep.
"Oh my god," that's what I mean, like, there's a real cost to this stuff, and
It's big. It can kill you.
it can kill you, like, the rise I was doing statistics because I have a lot of, like, trauma-informed background and stuff, and I do it from a leadership perspective with women specifically, and autoimmune cases have been on the rise in women over the last, like, 7 years by, like, 70%, or, like, there's wild, wild stats around autoimmune, and so I think you're really onto something just through the through line that you're offering,
Yeah.
right? The cost of
Yeah.
quiet.
And ultimately, we subvert our relationships too, because relationships to be close and connected really require open hearted communication. And that's the method I give in the book, Self Connected Communication, is a way to do this to make it a little easier when these conversations feel scary so that we can come forward. But no matter what, whether the relationship lasts or not, because it takes two to tango,
Sure.
you are preserving your relationship with yourself. You're keeping yourself healthy. You're staying in integrity. You're being true to yourself. And once you live like that and you connect and you realize, oh, wow, this is this inner voice that tells me, oh, don't say that. It won't go well. It won't make a difference anyway. That is a part of you trying to keep you safe because it's natural for conflict in relationships that matter to feel scary, but it will undermine you in the long run. It leads to tremendous buildup of resentment and victimology. Another term I coin in my book is victim volcano syndrome. And this is where things
Gosh.
build up. And I see this a lot. And I was this in my first marriage. And I've been this in jobs too, where things stack up inside because we tell ourselves we can't or it won't go well. And in our mind, it's the other person's fault that we can't say or do the thing or advocate for ourselves. And all that pressure builds up like hot lava. And then one day, one small thing happens, you blow, and then your legitimate grievance never gets addressed or heard because the problem becomes you and your seemingly disproportionate reaction to this small thing.
The victim volcano, I have felt guilty of,
Too.
and it sucks because it does come out sideways, right? You overreact to a small situation, but you underreacted to the big ones.
That's it.
And so that's, like, such a great coin and a frame for the listeners to, like, understand. But I wanna go back to, you had mentioned something that you have a framework for, like, the self-talk or self-communication, and I
Mhm.
think that if you're open to sharing maybe some of that, I would love the listeners to get those golden nuggets, so.
Sure. So, like so many great things, it's relatively simple. It's just not easy to do until you begin the journey of really connecting to yourself. And that's why I call it self connected communication, because we tend to react very quickly. And let's just say with a romantic partner, even in a healthy relationship, the way we're wired for both connection and safety is a bit of a neurobiological paradox. And because of that, even anticipated conflict can feel really scary and threatening. We're so sensitive to shifts in facial expression, changes in tone, body language, that we will pick up danger, danger, danger in these moments, even when it's safer than it feels. This is our evolutionary wiring. So, this process is about, okay, first of all, let's acknowledge that conflict in these moments is going to feel scary, and that's normal. And by connecting to ourselves, we can work through that and then we can come forward in a way that is clear and vulnerable and kind. So, in this framework, I give you a process for pausing before you engage in the conversation or before you react from some kind of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn behaviors, shutting down, lashing out, rolling your eyes, blaming, accusing, right? Criticizing,
All the things.
defensiveness, all the things that are human and instinctive if we're not really connected. So we pause and connect to ourselves, and we identify that we have a sage self within, which is our wisest, most loving self. And that part knows, that's our intuitive guide. And we really build a relationship with that part. And we recognize that we all have a little girl inside, that inner child, whether you like that language or not. I know before I became a therapist, I probably would have been like, that sounds so cheesy. So there's still this little girl inside this aging, wrinkled, sun-spotted body, right? And I say that with love. I say that with self-love. I'm not someone who's scared to age, but we've got to tend to that part. And we've got to do all of this work before we approach a partner or a boss, because what happens then is that we can get curious about why we're feeling what we're feeling. We can name those emotions, which helps us actually regulate. And we can really get clear about what the emotions are telling us about what we need. Emotions are information processing signals that inform, do we need comfort? Do we need reassurance? Do we need a behavior change? And so we do all of this work, and then I give you a template, a blueprint. I call it the self-connected communication blueprint, to actually, with very specific questions to ask inside yourself to help you regulate and get clarity. And then you come forward with knowing exactly what to say. And you're coming forward from that sage self, your most wise, loving adult part of self, on behalf of you, your vulnerable needs, and you're able to be assertive, which is really about being clear, but also kind while we deliver the message. And what's amazing is that I will have all of these women come in and say, oh, I am communicating. I do say it. And they don't really realize, because I was this way too, that they may not be saying it in a regulated way. They may not be saying it with as much clarity and assertiveness and also tact, because it's very hard to hear feedback. We have to come forward from our most empowered place. And these same women, when they start to use these methods, will say, wow, I didn't think it was going to be different, but I tried this and I got a very different response. Doesn't mean every time, but a lot of the time, you're inviting someone into an honest, adult, vulnerable, real conversation, and it can shift everything.
I love that. I got the goosebumps several times as you were saying that. But one thing I want to go back into, I swear there's so many paths I could take with our conversation. I'm like, where do I want to go? But I think it's important. I love the and anyway. And that's not just from like, hey, I have this thing, I'm this career, and I do all these things, but just the philosophy of and, right? Um, Dichotomy, duality, juxtapositions, they exist. And I think that societally, we're so conditioned to be either or, that as women, when we feel like it, like you were saying, like in a place of conflict, that we need to be assertive and truthful, and that it could be scary and needed. We pick one path, right? We'll pick, oh, that's scary, so I'm not going to do it. And I think I would really love to hear from you a little bit more about dichotomy and the and that two things can be true. So on to you, Colette.
Yes, it's the greatest truth in psychology. And I think what it is to be human is that multiple things are true at the same time. And we have to really learn to hold that doesn't have to keep us stuck when we can acknowledge that and give space to both of those pieces. I think a lot of listening to your intuition is giving space to all the different voices inside and parts of self. I'm really big on that because I've seen it help people in psychology, and it can help with our ands. There's a part of me, in simple terms, that goes to work as a therapist. And then there's a different part of me that does my radio show and gives a keynote. And then there's a different part of me that goes out on a Friday night and has a couple cocktails, although she doesn't really get to come out that much lately.
I know. I'm like,
right?
I feel you on that, but same.
Yeah, the part of me that would want to go out dancing. And as I say this, I'm like, I need to do this soon, because we need joy and play, right? We're serious and we're committed and we're driven. and we're loving and vulnerable and scared. And all of those things can be true. I like to, because I am such an open book, and I believe in acknowledging the vulnerable parts, that it really helps other people feel seen and understood. And it also helps me to feel more connected. So I do a lot of public speaking, and I'm now a professional speaker, a keynote speaker. I've done a TEDx talk. I am also simultaneously terrified of public speaking. So every time I get up, and this is because it's an evolutionary thing, this is why it's so common. So many of us, especially those of us who are sensitively wired, we have highly attuned limbic systems. So a lot of empathy, a lot of death awareness goes with that. So the empathy makes me a great therapist, but it also means I feel the fear in an emotionally or physically dangerous situation in a very highly attuned way. Those things are all wired into the limbic system. So when I get up in front of an audience, my body thinks I'm going to die. And in my head, I know that's not true. And I end up loving it. 60 seconds in, I'm golden. But every time, even in low stakes appearances, even to stand up in front of a room full of people and ask a question, my heart starts to thud and I feel adrenaline coursing through my system. And this beautiful and frame you're offering, Becca, is the way that I navigate that to move forward, and that I've built a thriving speaking career too, is by saying, okay, so I get scared. Like that little girl inside me is really scared of judgment, humiliation, embarrassing myself. My adult self knows that even if the worst happened, I'm not going to die, but that little girl doesn't know that. So I just need to hold that with compassion and get up and do it anyway. It's the ability to hold that duality, that those things can be true at the same time, that really lets us move forward without judging ourselves, and I think become our best selves because we can embrace that other side.
I love that you shared that because I believe that wholeheartedly. I think that for me, when I embraced the and allowed multiple things to be true at the same time, it kind of reminded me of like the Grinch at Christmas. Like I felt like my heart grew 5 times and I'm like, oh my gosh, and I felt the expansiveness of it. And, for me personally, what it did is it helped resolve a lot of inner conflict. Like I just felt it melt away. And I'm like, okay, like, for an example, my brother passed away sadly about 2 years ago, and I had just written a return to radi I was in the process when he passed away of writing a return to radiance. I was in the final editing process with the publisher. I was on chapter 22. I remember it very vividly, and then I made the commitment to see it through because that's what he would have wanted, and so I was actively grieving one of my biggest losses and celebrating one of my biggest accomplishments at the same time, and I just had to lean into this philosophy, and it was probably my most epic version of the and, even though people see all my, like, stuff like, "Oh, you worked this full-time job and did all these things," but that was probably the most epic expression of 2 polar opposites that I have given space for, and it was a blessing because I got to feel the joy of the celebration, and then I allowed myself to feel the pain of the loss, and it made me just appreciative for the capacity that we do have as
Yeah.
human beings that we don't think we do. So,
Oh
anyway,
my
I
gosh.
appreciated that.
I'm so sorry you lost your brother, but what a beautiful way to express how powerful this shift can be. You know, what you're speaking to, too, is really, just to get into psychotherapy for a quick moment, it's really the biggest marker of psychological health is flexibility. Yeah, yeah. So, just from an individual standpoint, and this is because life is complex and messy and it doesn't go according to plan, and people don't behave the way we want to, and we set out on a path and the journey winds along the river. It's not a
Yes.
straight shot. So when we're able to make space for multiple realities that coexist and are often really pulling at one another, there can be a struggle where people get stuck as judging themselves, or I shouldn't feel this way, or, just to make it simple, but the example I gave, like, well, why am I still afraid of this? Or I shouldn't be afraid. Or people will say to me, you seem so confident. And I even had one person say one time, you shouldn't tell people you feel so afraid. And I thought, No, honey,
Yeah.
you're wrong. But right, because actually what has been beautiful about it is it helps me feel better and it's connected me to so many people. So many people say, "Oh my gosh, I feel the same way." And it gives me so much hope and inspiration that if you can do it feeling that way, I can too. I in fact recently went to hear a keynote speech that blew my mind at 100 Women Strong here in town. And the woman who gave the keynote, it was her first one ever. It was beautiful. She got a standing ovation. Everyone was crying. She told her story. And afterwards, I went up to hug her and she said, "You are a big part of why I felt like this was possible for me." And that's not to give myself credit, but it's my vulnerability in acknowledging those polarities that helped her to feel like she could do it too.
Yes, that's it. That's like it really is that gift of like when you embrace it and you know it, you give that gift to someone else. That's
Yes.
incredible.
And it's this thing in communication, Becca, like this method we're talking about here and not avoiding these hard moments. It's the same thing. When you learn to show up and really be yourself, that's what I'm advocating for in these conversations that we acknowledge to people. This is really hard. It's scary. I don't usually bring these things up. That helps other people lower their walls too. And then we're in it together. We're all scared to have these conversations.
I love that. So I want to ask you another question.
Yeah.
Now that you've released the book and you're out promoting it and you're getting feedback and stuff, what is a current aha that is up for you?
Ooh, what a good question. Okay, I think the biggest well, first of all, I have a couple. One is how hard this whole book thing is. I have to
It really
say,
is.
I really foolishly thought the hardest part was gonna be writing the book.
And then you're like, oh my God, I got to market it and support it.
Yes, and that's hard. I really love people and love life and love connecting with people. And in today's world, the publishing process is hard. It's a lot on an author, even with a big publisher. So I think I got really stressed out and really succumbed to the pressure of it all for a little while. And that made me realize I still had my own places to grow even. And that I think was a powerful lesson learned the hard way, like so many are. But also then reconnecting out of that with people. I was having brunch the other day. I mean, this really happened. I could not believe it, even though this is why I wrote the book. This woman I've never met came up to me and said, "I just read your book and you saved my marriage." And I was like, "Oh my God, yeah, it could make me cry again now." And the reason it makes me so emotional is because, first of all, like how gratifying to have that moment. But also, it's like rediscovering, yes, this is why I wrote the book. Not
Yes.
to like have all the things and, get my publisher's quota and make people happy. And I did like 72 podcasts or something absurd. I was running around doing all these events. It's reconnecting to the why that I really wrote the book for a mission. And I wanted to share what I've learned over these years, the information I wish I had in my first marriage to help people show up differently in life and love and at work. And hearing from somebody again, I think the biggest aha for me is that we can get so distracted by the noise and the shoulds and the high achieving women that like wanting to accomplish. And of course I want that too, but that this is what it is about is connecting and impacting people's lives. And I started out knowing that, and then I got a little lost along the way in like
I
fear
understand.
and stress, and then I got it back.
That is great. And that is such a good aha too, because I think regardless what your individual journey is, I think there's a lot of listeners that can be like, oh my gosh, I set out to do this thing and was chasing the to-dos and the action items of it or
And the
the achievement of
achievement,
it. The achievement of it and got disconnected from the joy, the purpose, and the impact.
the
And
why.
we were yeah, the why, and we were talking about this in our in our pre-conversation, but it's like what I wanna say to the listeners, just to piggyback on Colette, is like, don't dismiss that intuitive knowing. Purpose is your intuition, passion is your intuition. You just sometimes we think, "Oh, our intuition is just our gut instinct," but it's actually expressed through our creativity, through our passion, through our purpose, through our impact, and if you follow those breadcrumbs very seldomly has it led me down a wrong path. So I'm so happy that you shared that as your aha, because I think it's important.
Me too. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's easy to get disconnected from it temporarily and get lost in the woods at times, especially in really busy or stressful seasons. But if we come back to that center, we will get answers. And this is why I'm big on in therapy. And I have some of this in the book too, really tuning in inside and asking directly, like talking to your intuition. You will get answers. You will be amazed that you have everything you need in there. We just have to tune in and listen.
Oh my gosh, I have goosebumps head to toe. What's an empowering message that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap?
The things that make you different are the things that will really endear you to your people. And I think we want to shed all those shoulds and just show up as we really are. And when we're doing that in communication and in the way we live, that's how we can really follow the intuitive path about our creativity and our purpose. And I want that for every woman who's listening. And I want that for me and you. The Cost of Quiet is available wherever books are sold or at thecostofquiet.com and also on my website, ColetteJaneFehr.com. And please feel free to reach out with any questions or comments. I'd love to hear from you guys.
If you like today's episode, there are several ways to support the show. As an independent creator, your engagement helps me continue to create it for you. And together, we help create a more regulated and radiant world. First, please rate and review the show on the platform where you listen, and consider sharing this episode with a friend, or maybe 5. That's how it grows, by sharing these ideas. Second, please sign up for my email where I send a short personal note to you every week. You can sign up at beccapowers.com/regulated. As always, thanks for listening, and remember, regulated people get radiant lives, and it's time for you to shine bright. Well, that's a wrap for today. I'll catch you in the next episode. Until then, stay regulated, radiant, and revived.